Day 2 of joint practices with the Atlanta Falcons is in the books. Things got a little scrappy, and we have a whole bunch of injury updates ahead of the Dolphins' first preseason game. All that here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting. You can find our shows on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Tip of the cap to our everydayers, because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Busy day in the way of headlines. We had player transactions. We had Mike McDaniel press availability. We had a joint practice with the Falcons in which the Dolphins defense and Falcons offense couldn't stop fighting each other. We had an injury at practice. We also had an Atlanta injury at practice, sending our absolute best wishes to Rondale Moore, carted off at today's practice. Atlanta Falcons wide receiver with an injury involving an air cast. And thankfully with the Dolphins training facility, they do have Baptist Health Training or the medical facility that's backed up right there to the practice field. So hopefully whatever Rondale Moore needed today, he got as quickly as possible, keeping him in our thoughts here. Best wishes. Obviously, anytime somebody gets carted off at a practice, it kind of takes the wind out of everything else that's going on. And that's obviously the biggest news impact for an individual player and for a team. That's this practice-ending injury to Rondale Moore. It sounded like a non-contact injury with one of his lower extremities. So best wishes to Rondale Moore, first and foremost. So we have a lot to get to, and it includes, I guess, if you went in chronological order, the Dolphins cut to Chase and Hines, the interior offensive lineman, in favor of Mike Harley, the Miami Hurricanes career receptions leader, to add another name to the wide receiver room, in part because Odell Beckham's still on the PUP. Jalen Waddle hasn't practiced for a few practices. Mike McDaniel talked about that. We'll talk about that in segment 2 on today's show. Don't get worried. Please don't get worried as it pertains to Jalen Waddle and some of these injuries for guys that have not been participating over the course of the past couple of days. Jordan Brooks was back today, for example, for the Dolphins at linebacker. And that Dolphins defense versus the Falcons offense, Atlanta's skill players stepped up and made some plays, whether it was Bijan Robinson or Kyle Pitts or whether it was Drake London. It's a really good test against elite physical talent that the Falcons have been able to assemble over the course of the past few years with their top 10 draft selections and drafting a bunch of skill guys. And they got a problem headache player in a couple of different rooms. This was a good practice for Atlanta, and credit the Falcons for, Miami kind of set the tone in the first practice. Things evened out by the end of that first practice. And then it really felt like Atlanta was the one that took the punch to Miami early on in today's practice. And things kind of teetered on the brink, it felt like, based off of the conversations that I've had with the people that were attendance. I spoke to all the same 4 people that I talked to after yesterday's practice. Dolphins defense is not going to take a lot of you-know-what from anybody. And that can be a blessing and a curse in a situation like this. It kind of created this testy environment where Miami's playing hard through the end of the echo of the whistle, and Atlanta guys didn't like it a whole lot. So there was a whole lot of scraps. There was a whole lot of kind of short fuses and tempers, and that was one of the primary storylines. And I like this Dolphins team playing with that edge defensively. I'm all the way here for it. As we said, Jordan Brooks was back after he was kind of shelved with something that was deemed to be just short-term maintenance. Mike McDaniel talked about kind of their school of thought asked specifically about Jalen Waddle, but with all of these guys from Miami, they want to make sure that anything that they're feeling now they don't carry with them throughout the course of the season because they played through it in the first week in August, all the way through preseason and training camp. So you respect that. As far as notable top-end performers for the Dolphins, and what they bring, what they brought to the table for practice here today. Offensively, very clunky, a little bit out of sync, out of rhythm. They found more explosive plays on Tuesday than they did on Wednesday. But Malik Washington, one of the big winners. River Craycraft wore the orange practice jersey today, in part because of his performance yesterday. But what he had done the week before that, the wide receivers had another strong performer in the way of Malik Washington, creating several big plays in the passing game down the field. And I'm trying to temper my expectations accordingly for Malik Washington because I thought he was like a fringe top 100 type pick. The Dolphins get him in the 6th round. Comes to an offense that has a lot of pass catchers, but he is physically talented, and there is an apparent fit with the Dolphins offense. But as a rookie, how much are you going to take on? But at the same time, he went to a couple of really good educational programs in Virginia and Northwestern. So if anybody's going to get it, it would be a guy like him. So I don't know where I sit with Malik Washington just yet, as far as not is he going to make the roster? I certainly think he's going to make the roster for the Dolphins. But what is the potential year one impact? But so it was nice to hear like he's starting to string together a few really positive days. Same for Julian Hill. Julian Hill had at least one big run after catch opportunity with the ball in his hands to create an explosive play for the Dolphins offense. And he continues to have positive notations down for him and what he is bringing in the run game, particularly on the edge. That is the straw that stirs the drink for the entire Dolphins offense, and skill players that can win. Blocking on the perimeter is really going to be a part of the engine that makes this thing go. So to know that Julian Hill continuing to stack days and then get a physical receiver like Malik Washington, even though he's not the biggest guy, you like that kind of turnout as far as, okay, there's a new guy and a guy who has experience in the system, but had a lot of room to grow and is continuing to show that he's growing into his spot. You feel good about that. Defensively, David Long, Duke Riley, a couple splash plays apiece. Sounds like Tier Tart had some disruption opportunities as well. And then, of course, you have Jalen Ramsey doing Jalen Ramsey things, right? Drake London did tag him for a reception on one instance, but other than that, very combative at the catch point, feisty, and the leader that you would expect based off of where his pay grade is, what his accolades are, how intense of an individual he is. That was a name that was brought up by more than one person as being somebody who had an admirable performance for the Dolphins defense as well. So some more of the usual suspects for the Dolphins defense. Now, we need to get into some injuries. We did have the big injury right now is with Aaron Brewer, the center. Had a hand issue that saw him leave the practice field early before the Rondale Moore injury ended practice early. We're getting into that next here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins, so make sure that you stick with us. Going to the game is not supposed to be stressful, and that's why you should get your tickets with Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, making getting tickets faster and easier than ever before. You can save up to 60% with killer last-minute deals. The prices on Gametime actually go down the closer you get to first pitch. You get the views from your seat with a panoramic view, so you know exactly what you're signing yourself up for from a sightlines perspective. And the Gametime ticket guarantee, they will credit you 110% of the difference if you find cheaper tickets in the same row and section for less somewhere else. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app. Create an account and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets with the lowest prices, guaranteed. Aaron Brewer, some kind of issue with his right hand is what it sounded like it was reported as. Leaves the practice field early, helmet in hand, walks off, goes into Baptist Health Training Complex, comes back out of Baptist Health Training Complex and watches some of practice before the Rondale Moore injury that ended practice. I can deduct if he went into Baptist Health and not like where the locker room is, but rather the actual health complex, you could probably deduct there may have been some imaging taking on Aaron Brewer and his hand. This is not like a lower body ligament tear or anything like that. I think that's important to remember because I've already seen, as you see, every time there's any ounce of adversity that this team experiences, the gloom and doom on the timeline and what the Dolphins need to do to add offensive linemen. Like this could very easily just be a hand contusion. And look, the Dolphins are going to be off tomorrow because they had 3 days of practice. And they're going to have the preseason game, which I don't think Aaron Brewer as the starting center would have played in anyway. And then they're going to have the next 2 days off for the weekend. So you got 3 of the next 4 days off. You got 4 days off in general. If he did get imaging taken and it was negative, like you could see Aaron Brewer snapping next week when they put the pads back on. He could have gotten cleated. He could have got his hand or a finger caught in a thing and just needed to get his fingers taped. But all anybody sees is the tweet on the timeline. Brewer leaves practice, goes into Baptist Health, and it is the sky is falling. Can we get some more information? This is the same thing that happened with Javon Holland on the first day of practice. And he gets flipped up over a guy, and everybody's freaking out. And Javon Holland practiced the next day. He was fine. So here's where you're at with injuries in the Dolphins, particularly in the offensive line. I don't think the fact that we have seen any Isaiah Wynn yet, that's the one for me that is the most negative development of the group. But you also kind of knew what the fine print was with Isaiah Wynn. And you kind of offset that by Robert Jones has looked good through the first 2 weeks of camp. Robert Jones has been very impactful in instances. He looks slimmer. He looks like he's moving better. Now, you still perceived, if Isaiah Wynn was going to win a starting job and Robert Jones was going to win the other guard spot, you'd probably feel pretty good about it. But without Isaiah Wynn, it's now Robert Jones presumably going into one of those spots and Eichenberg going to the other. But now Brewer goes down on the same day with a hand injury that might be nothing. And we're all losing our minds. And whether we want to openly admit it or not, this ideological pillar of what this team is, it's talked about in coaching clinics, whether that's Chris Forrester, who's now in San Francisco as the offensive line coach. It's talked about in his press conferences. It's talked about in other coaching clinics for teams that run the Shanahan tree wide zone systems. They trust their ability to mitigate offensive line deficits. And if you choose as a football fanatic not to embrace that, that's fine. But please understand, Mike McDaniel is a subscriber to this. Right? And it's a organizational decision because I think about the same general manager that's a part of this team that let Rob Hunt walk and has kind of been selective and I don't want to say cheap, but they haven't spent heavily. Go back to 2020. They spent a top 40 pick on a guy who ended up playing guard for them for 4 years. They gave a free agent offensive guard. This was 4 years ago. $10 million a season in free agency. And then they spent 2 fourth-round picks to trade up in the same class to draft another guard. So, it's within the system. They have what they believe in, what they trust, and the traits that they look for. And it's not a point of emphasis. And that comes from like head coach organizationally and down. Now, if you don't have Isaiah Wynn for an extended period, and there is something with Aaron Brewer where he's going to miss some amount of time, I would expect you'll see a little bit more urgency from the sake of the Dolphins because now you're potentially looking at an offensive line that would have Teron Armstead when he's out there, Robert Jones at left guard. It would be presumably Liam Eichenberg at center, question mark, Jack Driscoll, Lester Cotton at right guard, and then it would be Austin Jackson at right tackle. Then you would certainly need at least another player that you feel like could start, because Kendall Lamb sounds like he's going to be a tackle-exclusive swing tackle. Patrick Paul, they're leaving at left tackle in general, which I think is smart for a young player. Let him settle into a spot. Keon Smith's getting some dabbling at guard, but I think things happen a little bit too fast for him in there with where he still has growth potential as far as utilizing his hands. He got promising snaps and looked promising in 70 snaps last year offensively, but it's just the body work's not there. But you should feel pretty good about what you have at tackle. And if Liam Eichenberg's your backup center, I think you can do a lot worse than that. But the question is anything wrong with Aaron Brewer or not? We don't know. But what we do know is everybody's jumping to every worst case scenario on the face of the planet. And we know nothing other than he was getting his hand looked like and he left practice. Can we at least wait and find out if something's wrong before we cancel the season for the third time in the preseason already because of a little bit of adversity? Please? Now, anyway, I digress. Jalen Waddle not practicing. The Dolphins signed a wide receiver, Mike Harley. I think it is important to note with Odell down, Ezukama's down right now, Waddle's down, Berrios has been down the last 2 days. Mike McDaniel commented on all of that, and we'll get into that. You need bodies. You need bodies to take reps in training camp so you don't run your guys that are going to be on the 53-man roster into the ground in training camp, because you don't have enough guys to spread the looks out across. Taj Washington's down. I mean, you've got a significant number of names in the wide receiver room who are dealing with something either severe or not severe. How severe it is, we'll let Mike McDaniel talk about it. So here's Mike McDaniel as far as Jalen Waddle specifically, but some of the guys that have been banged up that we have not seen in the last few days.
The minor stuff. We have a collection of minor things going on. Good news is they aren't major things, but some stuff that has been fluctuating the players out there on the field.
With Waddle, last year he played through a lot. Is there anything you guys can do to kind of minimize some of that impact he takes?
Oh, for sure. That's I think our mindset each and every year with every player is to take information and that you are accumulating it to better serve the players and him in particular. So I think that's part of the reason you haven't seen him. We understand his body. We understand how to be a little more proactive with something. We understand how tough he is, and he's one of the toughest wide receivers that I've ever had the opportunity to coach, and that is a great thing. However, when you're trying to make sure that you get the season started off on the right foot and that you best facilitate the best case scenario of health, then you take measures that and you learn new things or red flags or whatever it be with that particular player.
Key phrasing here. Nothing major or minor stuff. And then the other key phrasing here is the word proactive. Because I know there's some frustration across the fan base with the training staff, for example, and they're dealing with injuries again. And yeah, it's football, right? And if you're going to be proactive to try to make sure that guys reach week one in whatever is the best case situation that they can find themselves in, that means you probably have to pull back the reins a little bit. And with a guy like Waddle, who's going into year 4 and has been in the system for the past 2 years, I'm generally unconcerned, right? And the fact that it's all minor stuff, and like Jordan Brooks had some minor stuff, and he was back today, and Berrios and Waddle dealing with some minor stuff that they're being strategic with. And then there's guys like Teron Armstead that are doing indie stuff, but they have their own ramp-up programs and are catered to their individual bodies. And then a guy like Jordan Poyer, who was a guy we haven't seen in about a week. And lo and behold, there's speculation watching him walk around in practice. Oh, Jordan Poyer's got a limp. Well, his significant other, Rachel Bush, just got on social media today because somebody said something and said he has a thumb injury. And he practiced with the thumb injury, and he had a pick with the thumb injury. And they want the thumb injury to not be a big deal. So he's getting rest now while he has the opportunity to get rest. Jordan Poyer's been in the league like a dozen years. Am I worried about Jordan Poyer understanding coverages? As long as he's working with Javon Holland and he's working with Marcus May and he's working with Elijah Campbell, and those guys are getting mental reps in the meeting rooms about these coverages and the disguises and how to do them, let the guy rest and get healthy and ready to go, right? The other part of that puzzle is guys playing in the preseason. And particularly, the Dolphins have a game in about 48 hours from right now, a little more than 48 hours from right now, as I'm recording this on Wednesday afternoon, against the Atlanta Falcons. Who plays, who doesn't play? Mike McDaniel was asked about that. We're going to get into that to close this episode of Locked On Dolphins. Stick with us. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to make sure you find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. This is not just another job board. LinkedIn helps you find professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire a professional like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Mike McDaniel was asked about Tua and the historical precedent that he as a coach has set as far as the preseason and guys playing in the preseason, and if we should expect to see Tua depending on how things go on Friday. And Mike McDaniel, in typical Mike McDaniel fashion, was very quick to remind everybody that the only thing that matters is today and this opportunity, and we'll make those decisions when we have to make those decisions. But he did kind of give you an answer, so we're going to get into that now. Here's Mike McDaniel.
The way that I really look at today and the value of it, I think you understand. What our procedure has always been that we collect all the data, fit the needs to the player, and establish how we want to approach those preseason games. We're doing that tomorrow as a staff. I can't tomorrow. At my press conference, right? Do I have one? But I do not want to get ahead of myself with all the guys, because we have to, I take that serious in terms of making sure that, we are getting each and every player to fit their needs and where their game's at. Do I expect from past scenarios that you're going to be surprised with as you'd put it, it would be a deviation from the last 2 years. I don't think you're going to be surprised.
So reading in between the lines here, probably not Tua, probably not a lot of your big dogs, right? The guys that are high up on the payroll, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, obviously the Dolphins edge guys that are recovering from injury, Teron Armstead. I'd probably put Austin Jackson and Zach Sealer in that boat. I think you're probably looking at fair game for healthy guys on the offensive interior, whether that's Rob Jones, Lee Mike Burke. Remember last year, Austin Jackson played a ton of snaps in the first preseason game. And they just wanted to get him reps. I think for those guys on the interior, I think that's probably applicable too, where you'd see those guys collect a good bit of reps. The guys on the defensive interior that are not named Zach Sealer, who has obviously a long-term contract in here as a pillar player, you're still trying to figure out what the rest of that group looks like. You probably want to get those guys reps and have Duke Riley and probably get a ton of snaps for Channing Tindall. Probably get a ton of snaps for Elijah Campbell and Saran Neal and Ethan Bonner defensively. The rookies that have made some plays like Storm Duck and Maitre. Zeke Vandenberg, who was on IR all year last year, playing stack off-ball linebacker, showing some promise. Those are the kind of guys that I think this first preseason game will be a lot about. And then you have a backup quarterback competition that you need to sort out. Based off of the practices that I saw, almost 2 whole weeks worth in Miami, Skylar Thompson has outperformed Mike White in the first 2 weeks of camp. And Skylar Thompson is due about $2.5 million less in cash this year, or compensation, than what Mike White is. Are you going to carry 3 quarterbacks with the new third emergency quarterback role where that guy can be on the practice squad? You can elevate him an unlimited number of times. I don't know. Like that, there's hard decisions to make there. So I would want to get those quarterback reps. I kind of want to figure that out. That's much more important to me than getting to a prep. If you want to have a dress rehearsal game, you can have a dress rehearsal game. I just probably wouldn't use it for the Falcons. And it doesn't sound like Mike McDaniel's going to either. But we'll see. The team is off tomorrow. The team has its preseason debut on Friday. Dolphins football is just about back. You can make sure you get caught up in the immediate aftermath. We will have a few things on the Locked On Dolphins feed, breaking down the game in the post game. So look forward to telling you guys a little bit more about that tomorrow. You can keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. I appreciate you guys for checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your day. I'm out of here. Go Dolphins.